There were 2 toothbrushes in the holder that morning. One was mine. The other wasn't hers. It was lime green, cheap, travel-sized, and wet. She'd left for work 10 minutes earlier. Said she had a client pitch. But I stood there staring at that toothbrush like it had blood on it. Because Callie uses an electric. A fancy, rose gold Sonicare she swore by. She would never touch a drugstore brush unless she was traveling. We weren't traveling. I didn't touch it. Didn't move it. Just sat on the edge of the tub, fully dressed for work, and stared at it while the bathroom light flickered above me like a dying star. The silence in that moment was suffocating. Not quiet, tense. Like the air was listening. And I knew. I didn't need texts. I didn't need photos. I didn't need to smell cologne on the pillow. Someone else had been in our house. Maybe last night. Maybe this morning. Maybe while I was picking up oat milk at 8:15 a.m. because she forgot to put it on the grocery list again. That stupid grocery list. She color-coded it in the Notes app. Green for fruits. Red for protein. Yellow for other. I never once saw a category labeled casual affairs. By noon I was driving. I didn't know where I was going. I just had to be moving. I passed our old college campus, the diner where she used to draw tiny doodles on napkins while waiting for her waffles, and the gas station where we once kissed for 8 minutes straight during a lightning storm. It all felt like another life. Someone else's highlight reel. At 3:12 p.m., she texted me. Did you take the trash out before leaving? Folded hands, light skin tone, yellow heart. The audacity. No mention of the toothbrush. No, I miss you. Just a request to take out the trash, like that's what I was now. A maintenance man for her new life. I didn't reply. Not yet. I wanted to see what else would happen. And right on cue, 48 hours later, she sat across from me in a cafe and said the words that cracked something primal inside me. I think we should take some space. Just like a trial separation. You know? Like it was a gym membership. Like I could just pause my vows. So I asked her one question. Not, are you cheating? Not, do you still love me? I asked, did he use my razor too? She blinked. Her throat made this tiny twitch, like she swallowed something dry. She didn't answer. That was enough. I packed a duffel bag that night. No drama. No yelling. Just 3 t-shirts, my laptop, and my dignity. What little of it was left. What she didn't know, couldn't know, is that I'd meet someone else exactly 92 days later. And that Callie, the same woman who told me she needed space, would show up to my second wedding with mascara tears and a look in her eyes that screamed, what have I done? But by then, it was too late. Way too late. I stayed at a motel the first night. Not because I didn't have options, but because I didn't want to explain. Not to friends. Not to family. Not even to myself. The room smelled like microwave popcorn and air freshener trying too hard. The wallpaper was peeling behind the TV, and someone had left a half-smoked cigarette in the parking lot ashtray. Still burning. Still warm. That first night, I laid on the bed, shoes still on, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the guest towel. It was beige, embroidered with tiny blue leaves. We bought it together during a weekend trip to Asheville. She said it made the bathroom feel intentional. I never even really knew what that meant, but I nodded because I was in love and wanted to be agreeable. The towel was still hanging in the same place when I left. But when I returned 2 weeks later to pick up the rest of my things, it was folded differently. Not like the way I do it. Not the way she used to either. This was a third way, someone else's method. Someone who probably didn't think twice about it. That towel messed me up more than her texts ever could. You see, love doesn't die with grand explosions. It dies with tiny shifts. A toothbrush. A folded towel. An unfamiliar cologne bottle hiding behind your aftershave. I didn't even confront her that day. I just grabbed my charger, a few hoodies, and the watch my dad gave me before his surgery. She stood by the doorway like I was a tenant moving out at the end of a short-term lease. Are you sure you want to do this? She asked. I wanted to laugh. Wanted to scream. Instead, I just said, I'm not the one who started. And I left. After that, things got weird. Not sad. Not angry. Just weird. She started texting me late at night. Never anything direct. Just random messages. Do you remember the pizza place on 9th? I heard our song at the pharmacy today. There's a cardinal that keeps landing on the windowsill. You'd like it. I ignored them all. Well, I read them. I didn't reply. Sometimes I draft responses and delete them. One time I wrote an entire letter in notes and never sent it. I kept telling myself, she doesn't miss you. She misses what you were to her. The convenience. The comfort. the certainty. But then came the voicemail. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Thursday. I was half asleep, half dead inside. I saw her name flash and disappear. Then the red dot. One new message. She didn't say anything for the first few seconds. Just quiet breathing. And then, you said you'd never leave me, and I let you. I don't even know who I am without you, Emory. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. That would have meant something if I hadn't already known the truth. Because 5 days before that voicemail, I saw her. Not saw as in bumped into. I mean saw. With him. I was sitting in my car at a red light, eating fries from a paper bag, when I looked up and saw her walking out of a wine bar with a man who looked like he could bench press a fridge. She touched his arm when she laughed. The same way she used to touch mine. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I didn't even finish my fries. I just drove home with that feeling in your chest when you realize a song you used to love has become unbearable to listen to. So I made a choice. A wild, impulsive, slightly dramatic choice. I joined a dating app. The kind with voice prompts and personality quizzes. I uploaded a picture from a wedding I attended 3 years ago, the last time I wore a tie that wasn't for court or a funeral. I wrote something vague in the bio. Recovering overthinker. Fluent in bad coffee and second chances. Didn't expect anything. But then I matched with Lydia. And Lydia didn't ask what happened. She didn't need the whole tragic backstory. She just wanted to know if I liked storms and poetry and if I'd ever been to Maine. By the third date, she told me I made her feel unreasonably safe. By the sixth, she said I should meet her dog. By the 10th, she kissed me like she meant it, not like she was trying to forget someone else. And just like that, the broken clock started ticking again. But Callie? She wasn't done. Not even close. And I had no idea the storm she was about to drag me into. There was still a spare key hanging on the wall. That hook next to the fridge, the little ceramic tile one with the painted sun on it. We bought it at some random street fair when we were 3 months into dating. It was supposed to hold my house keys, her lanyard, and eventually, the spares for our apartment, then our car, then our lives. One hook for 2 people trying to move in the same direction. But when I stopped by the apartment to drop off the last piece of mail forwarded to me, I noticed something odd. Her keys were gone, but the spare was still there. My old key. Mine. She didn't take it down. She didn't throw it away. She left it right where it always was, like she wanted me to believe I still had a place. Like she was keeping the door unlocked in case I came back, or in case her guilt did. I didn't say anything. I didn't leave a note. I just dropped the water bill envelope on the counter, turned around, and left. But I swear to you, and maybe this is just my imagination, or maybe I've finally started to crack. I could feel the apartment watching me leave. Not her. Not a person. The space. The air. That stillness of a place where love used to live, but now just rents the room. That same night, Callie called me again. I was out walking with Lydia. She had just told me this long story about how she accidentally adopted a cat after trying to buy a couch on Craigslist. I laughed harder than I had in months. My phone buzzed. I looked down and saw the name. That name. Lydia noticed. She asked, "Everything okay?" And I lied. I said it was spam. But later that night, alone, I listened to the voicemail. Callie sounded different. Fragile. But not in a performative way. Not the way she used to when she'd fake cry watching documentaries to prove she was deep. This was raw. She said, "I can't sleep in our bed. I've been on the couch for 3 weeks. He doesn't come over anymore. I think he's seeing someone else. I think I made the biggest mistake of my life." I wanted to scream into the phone. I wanted to say, "You made 17 mistakes before this one." I wanted to tell her about Lydia. About how she breathes through her nose when she laughs. How she tells strangers that I'm the best cook she's ever dated. I make grilled cheese and pancakes. And how I actually started liking who I am when I'm with her. But I didn't. I saved the voicemail. Played it back once. Then deleted it. Still, something inside me felt off. Not guilt. Not nostalgia. Something else. Like an itch in a part of my soul I forgot existed. So I did something I shouldn't have. I went back to our old photo folder on my cloud drive. Scrolled past our honeymoon in Banff. The camping trip where she broke her ankle. The blurry, awful selfie we took in the grocery store parking lot the night I first told her I loved her, right after a rainstorm. And then, in one of the more recent photos, I saw it. There was a man's coat hanging on the kitchen chair. Not mine. Not a guest's. Too nice, too new. The kind of coat that doesn't belong to someone just passing through. A charcoal trench with leather trim on the sleeves. Still had a tag on it. The timestamp said it was taken 2 weeks before she asked me to leave. So I started putting things together. Little pieces I'd ignored or brushed aside before. The new hand soap she claimed she won in an office raffle. The coffee beans that weren't the brand we used to get. The new playlist on our shared streaming account called Unwind After Work Blue Heart, which I hadn't created. Callie had been preparing to replace me before she ever told me. Not just emotionally, physically, systematically, piece by piece. Like I was furniture being slowly moved out of the living room without anyone noticing. But if that was her plan, then why was she calling now? Why cry when I moved out? Why keep my spare key on the hook? Why whisper those things into my voicemail at 2 in the morning like I was still hers? The answer came a week later, dressed in a cream-colored sweater and pretending to be casual. She showed up at my door. Yes, that door. The one above the candle shop. Lydia was out walking the dog. I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I opened the door and saw Callie, hair pulled back, no makeup, her eyes red from something recent, all I could say was, "Why are you here?" She looked at me for a long time before answering, like she was trying to recognize who I'd become. Then she said, "I saw the photos of you and her. The wedding venue. The dress. Is this real?" And I swear to you, I've never wanted to be cruel more than in that moment. I wanted to say yes, it's real. That I moved on. That I'm better now. That she doesn't matter anymore. But all I said was, "You told me to leave. You never said I could come back." She started crying. And it wasn't for me. It was for the version of me she didn't think I'd ever become. She stood there in the hallway like the ghost of a decision I hadn't made yet. Her sweater sleeves were too long, like she'd borrowed them from someone bigger, and her fingers were twisting themselves into knots like they were trying to say what her mouth couldn't. I didn't move. I didn't invite her in. I just watched her cry and wondered how many times I'd cried without her even blinking. "I didn't know it was real," she said again, quieter this time. "The wedding. Her. I thought it was some kind of rebound thing." But she posted the venue. The caption said, "Can't wait to marry my best friend." Is that true? Is she your best friend now? It was such a childish question, the kind you'd expect from someone half her age. And yet, it hit harder than it should have. Because she was my best friend, once. Before the toothbrush. Before the silence. Before the distance between us became the only thing we could agree on. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I asked one of my own. "Why are you really here, Callie?" She looked down, and for a second, I thought she might lie. But something shifted in her face. That familiar twitch in her jaw. That reflex when she's holding something back. I used to know her tells like I knew my own heartbeat. Seems I still did. "I was pregnant," she whispered. My spine stiffened. "Was?" She nodded slowly. "About a month before I asked you to leave. I didn't know how to feel. I wasn't sure if it was yours or his. And before I even had the guts to figure that out, I lost it. It was like the floor slid sideways. Everything tilted." She continued, "I didn't want you to know. I couldn't carry the shame of it. I thought if I just pushed you away, you'd leave without asking too many questions." I sat down because I had to. Not out of shock, but out of this dizzying mix of betrayal and pity and rage that didn't know where to land. "You buried all of that and just pretended like it was about being unhappy?" Callie bit her lip, hard. I was unhappy. That was true. But I was also scared. I thought if I could just start fresh with someone else, I could become someone else. But I couldn't. He was nothing like you. He never asked how my day was. He never made me tea when my stomach hurt. He didn't even know what my favorite side of the bed was. He just made me feel like I didn't have to be responsible for anything. And I wanted that. I wanted to not be responsible for what I'd done to you. I hated that I understood her. I hated that a part of me, a very small, still bleeding part, remembered how heavy it was to be someone's entire emotional world. I carried her anxiety like it was my second job. I knew when she was pretending to be okay at dinners. I knew what songs not to play around her. I knew when her silence meant, "Don't touch me." And when it meant, "Please hold me tighter." But Lydia didn't make me decode her pain. She spoke in whole sentences. She laughed in full volume. She didn't ask me to shrink so she could breathe. "You're not here because you miss me," I said finally. "You're here because I moved on before you did. That's all." Her eyes met mine, and for once, she didn't argue. She just stood there in that hallway, shoulders caved in, looking like someone who finally realized the house fire she started had burned down her own bedroom too. I didn't think you'd actually love someone else, she whispered. And that, right there, was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. Because that's what this was all about. Control. Assumptions. She thought she could walk away, experiment with a life that didn't include me, and I'd just stay put. Waiting. Stuck. Quietly loving her from a distance while she figured things out. But I had changed. The silence had turned into something new. Something sharper. I had learned how to breathe without her. And once I tasted that kind of air, clean, light mine, there was no going back to the smog of what if. She looked around the apartment, my apartment, for something to anchor herself to. A sign that she still belonged. But there was nothing here for her anymore. No framed photos. No old mugs. No toothbrush on the sink. Lydia had filled the spaces Callie left behind, not by trying, but just by existing in them without stepping on my lungs. I should go, she said, barely audible. I didn't stop her. I didn't walk her out. I didn't even close the door behind her. I just listened to her footsteps disappear down the stairs, wondering if she'd ever really hear them herself. That night, I didn't tell Lydia what happened. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I needed one last night to sit with the ghost of a woman I once swore I'd grow old with. I poured a glass of red wine, stared at the key she never took off the hook, and thought about the version of me that used to wait for her. He was gone now. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. The next morning, I found an envelope slid under my door. No return address. No handwriting on the front. Just one of those thick manila office envelopes with a faint bend in the top corner, like someone had second-guessed themselves halfway through pushing it under. I opened it slowly, thinking maybe it was from Lydia, a surprise, a note, something sentimental. But it wasn't. Inside were two things, a printed photo and a key. The photo was grainy, clearly zoomed in from a distance, but unmistakable. It was Callie, sitting in the passenger seat of a black SUV. Smiling at someone in the driver's seat I couldn't fully see, except for the silhouette of a man with a buzzed head and a ring on his right index finger. My stomach tightened. I flipped the photo over. Nothing written. No date. No location. Just the photo. And the key. I recognized that key. It was from the storage unit we rented together the year we moved in. The one on Roland Avenue. The only place her name was still listed beside mine. We had stuffed it full of wedding decorations, extra furniture, books we never read, and half-finished art projects she swore she'd come back to. We hadn't been there in over a year. I shouldn't have gone. But I did. I skipped lunch, canceled a meeting, drove to the facility like my car had its own agenda. The guy at the front recognized me. I mumbled something about needing to retrieve personal items. He buzzed me in without checking the records. I guess heartbreak doesn't always need credentials. The unit smelled like cardboard and forgotten promises. It was colder than I remembered. A thin layer of dust coated everything. Our old coffee table was leaning against the wall, next to the giant canvas we painted together one weekend in 2017. I ran my hand across it and felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and nausea. Then I saw it, a drawer unit. Small. Cheap wood. We used it for office supplies back when we still worked at the same folding desk. It had 3 drawers. The bottom one was locked. I stared at it for a long time, then looked down at the key. When it clicked open, it was like opening a vein. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. Some were in envelopes. Some were just loose pages folded in half. Every single one of them started the same way. If I ever have the courage to tell you. The first was dated 3 months before she asked me to leave. The contents were confessions. Secrets. Not just about the affair, though those were there too, but about her. Her depression. Her doubts. Her long-standing fear that I'd outgrow her. That I'd become too good and realize she was never enough. She admitted to reading my journals when I wasn't home. Watching my GPS location when I stayed late at work. She wrote about the time she deliberately started a fight before my job interview because she didn't want me to leave the city. She said she felt safest when I was small, when I was scared, because it meant I wouldn't leave her. I sat there on the concrete floor reading letter after letter until the fluorescent lights overhead started to buzz like they were about to go out. And something inside me, something naive and innocent and stupid, cracked in half. She hadn't just betrayed me with someone else. She had orchestrated my stagnation, curated my self-doubt, built her entire emotional safety net out of my insecurity. I left the storage unit in silence. Took none of the letters with me. Left them there like haunted artifacts in a sealed tomb. I didn't need them. I already knew what they said. I'd felt it in every silent dinner, every passive-aggressive sigh, every time she told me, "You don't get it," when I asked what was wrong. Back at my apartment, Lydia was sitting on the couch, eating cereal out of a coffee mug, watching a nature documentary with her feet tucked under her like a kid. I kissed the top of her head and said nothing, just absorbed her, the way she existed without needing to control the room. She didn't even ask where I'd been. She never did. But I wasn't okay. Not really. That night, I had a dream. Callie was standing in our old kitchen, barefoot, cutting lemons. She looked up at me and smiled, but when I walked closer, I realized her hands were bleeding. Not from the knife, from gripping the lemons too tightly. She was squeezing them like stress balls, letting the juice run down her arms, but smiling the whole time. I woke up with my chest tight and my hands shaking. And that's when I decided to block her number. Not because I was angry, but because the version of her I'd carried in my mind, the version I defended, missed, grieved, never actually existed. She was a shape I filled with my own loneliness, not a partner. She was a mirror, not a window. But fate doesn't let go just because you've had enough. Because the next morning, someone knocked on my door. And it wasn't Callie. It was him. The man from the photo. The one she never thought I'd meet. He knocked twice. Not hard, not rushed, just deliberate. The kind of knock you give when you already know the door's going to open. I stood there for a few seconds before answering, just staring through the peephole, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was him. The man from the photograph. Buzzed hair. Square jaw. Black coat. That same silver ring on his right index finger. He looked like the kind of guy who always finds a way to be in control. Not aggressive, not loud, just settled. Like he didn't need to announce himself to be taken seriously. I opened the door just a few inches, enough to speak, but not invite. He didn't smile, didn't blink, just said, "Emory?" His voice was deep but calm, unfazed, the way a surgeon probably speaks before cutting someone open. "Who's asking?" "I'm Mason." He paused, waited for recognition that didn't come. "I was with Callie." "Was," I repeated. Past tense. He nodded once, slow. "Yeah, was." There was a beat of silence between us where neither of us said anything, but 100 unspoken things passed through the air like invisible static. Then he looked down, exhaled through his nose, and said something I never expected. "I need to talk to you. Not about her. About something else." Every instinct in my body told me to shut the door, to walk away, to protect what little peace I had left. But curiosity is a disease that pretends to be logic, and it always wins. So I opened the door wider and gestured for him to come in. He didn't sit, just stood near the entrance like a soldier reporting in. "She told me you were smart," he said. "Detail-oriented. The kind of guy who notices when people change their shampoo." "Did she also tell you I don't like cryptic strangers in my living room?" That got a tiny smile out of him. Not friendly, more like he appreciated the jab. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small padded envelope. Handed it to me like it was evidence. I opened it slowly. Inside were two things, a flash drive and a folded receipt from a private storage facility, not the one Callie and I used. This was somewhere across town. New name, new contract, opened 3 months ago. Under his name. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "I need you to understand something," Mason said, folding his arms. "I didn't know she was married when we met. She never wore a ring. Said she'd just gotten out of a long relationship. That she was healing. She was charming, yeah. But she had this gravity, like she needed saving but would never ask for it." I didn't respond. I'd heard versions of this story before, but he wasn't finished. A month in, I started to feel like something was off. She was hot and cold. Euphoric one day, absent the next. I thought it was me, but I noticed she always got nervous when my phone rang. Always glanced at my screen when I got texts. He stepped closer, dropped his voice just slightly. "So I ran a background check. I know. Sounds paranoid, but I've been burned before, and that's when I found out about you." I clenched my jaw, still unsure where this was going. "I confronted her," he continued. "She didn't deny it. Said she loved you, but you were comfortable. Said I made her feel like a different version of herself. Said she needed that version to breathe." He shook his head, jaw tight. "I was stupid. I didn't leave right away. She told me she was pregnant." The word hit me like a punch I wasn't braced for. "She told me it was mine," he said. "Said you didn't know?" but she never acted like someone preparing to be a mother. She drank, took pills, would vanish for days, then come back like nothing happened. My stomach turned. I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. Mason walked to the center of the room now. His stance softened, like what he was about to say next cost him something. I got suspicious, so I followed her one night. She didn't know. She went to that unit. He nodded toward the envelope I still held. I waited until she left. Broke in. Inside, there were journals, old hard drives, voice memos, stuff going back years, stuff about you. I stared at him. She was documenting you, Emory. Not in a sweet way. In a calculated way. She tracked your routines. Times you got home. Notes on when you were most emotionally vulnerable. Even kept a list of the phrases that worked best to defuse you. That's the phrase she used. Defuse. Like you were a device. Something dangerous. My skin felt cold. She used me. But she built you, Mason said. She curated your emotions. Managed your moods like a stock portfolio. I don't know why. Maybe she was scared. Maybe it made her feel powerful. But I thought you deserved to know. I felt hollow. Like everything I ever felt for Callie had been retroactively rewritten by this new information. She hadn't just lied. She hadn't just cheated. She had engineered me. Like a psychological project. A control study. A person she could program. I wanted to throw the envelope into the fire. Pretend I never heard any of it. But I also wanted the truth. The full, ugly truth. Because there's something worse than being manipulated. It's never realizing that you were. Mason stepped toward the door. I'm not here to make peace, he said. I'm just trying to put a period at the end of my own sentence. What you do with that? He nodded toward the flash drive. That's your call. And then he was gone. Just like that. And I was alone again. With a flash drive full of answers I wasn't sure I wanted. And a wedding in 2 weeks I suddenly wasn't sure I deserved. I didn't plug in the flash drive right away. It sat on my desk for nearly 3 days, untouched, like a live wire I was too afraid to handle. I'd walk past it like it was something fragile, a porcelain secret, afraid that once I opened it, I wouldn't be able to unsee what it held. Mason's words played on a loop in my head. She tracked your routines, times you got home, emotional vulnerabilities. I started second-guessing everything. Not just my memories of Callie, but my memories of myself. Was I even who I thought I was back then? Or just a reflection of her projections? Had I really loved her? Or had she simply engineered the version of her I'd fall for, piece by piece? There was something deeply violating about it. Not physical. Not even emotional in the typical sense. It felt existential. Lydia noticed, of course. She didn't pry. That's the thing about her. She knows when to lean in and when to give me space. But I could tell the distance was growing. The wedding was less than 2 weeks away, and instead of planning final details or doing tastings, I was lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at a USB like it had a heartbeat. Eventually, I gave in. I waited until Lydia was out walking the dog and sat down at my laptop. No ceremony. No deep breath. I just plugged it in like I was ripping off a bandage. The drive was titled Notes CA. One folder. Inside were 6 audio files, 3 PDFs, and 1 spreadsheet. The first audio file was dated nearly a year before we split. I clicked play. Her voice came through, sharp and clear, as if she were in the room with me. Day 14. He's still using the morning alarm without snoozing. I've noticed he's more agreeable before coffee, but less receptive to feedback around 9 to 11 a.m. Tested again with mild criticism about the towel placement. Mild defensiveness, but no escalation. Successful de-escalation with physical touch, shoulder only. Noted. I paused it. I thought I'd misheard. Played it back. I hadn't. She was logging tests. Emotional response patterns. My behaviors. My habits. My reactions. It wasn't a journal. It was a lab report. The next few audio files were more of the same. Methodical. Cold. Clinical. Occasionally, her tone would crack, and I'd hear something closer to guilt, but it was fleeting, gone by the next entry. She was treating me like a subject. Not a partner. Not a person. I opened the PDFs next. The first was titled Triggers and Stabilizers. It was a full list of things that either emotionally destabilized or grounded me, with categories, timestamps, examples. One section read, Instability, career-related self-worth, e.g., promotions of peers, low-income anxiety. Stabilizers, physical closeness, nostalgic food, music tied to college years, especially. The national, iron and wine. I felt sick. I felt seen in the worst way. Not understood, dissected. The spreadsheet was the final blow. A year-long calendar. Every column filled with codes. Each row labeled with date, time, and an entry for my emotional volatility score on a scale of 1 to 5. Notes in the margins like empathy high, suggest vulnerability, or resentment spike, shift narrative. Narrative. As if our life together had been one long, curated plot, and I'd been reading from a script she rewrote in secret every night. I shut the laptop, pulled the flash drive out like it was poison, and walked straight to the kitchen. For a moment, I hovered over the sink, considering whether to throw it in, let it die in the drain, and pretend it never existed. But I didn't. Instead, I wrapped it in a paper towel, shoved it into a Ziploc bag, and buried it under the floorboards in the hall closet. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because something told me I might need proof someday. Not legal proof. Psychic proof. Evidence that I hadn't imagined the manipulation. That I wasn't crazy for feeling destroyed by what happened. That night, I couldn't sleep next to Lydia. Not because I didn't love her, but because I did. And I didn't know how to be loved honestly anymore. I didn't know if my reactions were mine or residual echoes from years of being psychologically managed like a volatile client. The guilt settled in hard. She stirred around 2 a.m., eyes heavy, voice soft. You okay? Yeah, just couldn't sleep. She nodded, already fading back to sleep. Trusting me, believing me. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I felt like I didn't deserve her trust. The next morning, I told her everything. Not every detail, not yet, but enough. That Callie had manipulated me in ways I couldn't fully explain. That a man she was involved with showed up at my door. That he gave me something that revealed who she really was. And I hadn't been the same since. Lydia didn't freak out. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why I hadn't told her sooner. She just said, okay, then let's figure out what healing looks like. Together. And I cracked. Because after everything I'd been through, I still didn't know how to accept someone who didn't want to fix me, or shape me, or study me like a blueprint for something broken. I only knew how to perform stability, not live it. But I wanted to try. We spent that weekend in silence. Not angry silence, but intentional quiet. Walks through the park. Sitting at the coffee shop reading separate books. No pressure to talk. No pressure to explain. Just being. And for the first time in a very, very long time, that felt like enough. Then Sunday came. And with it a letter. From Callie. No envelope. No return address. Just a single sheet of paper, slipped under the door again like a ghost refusing to vanish. The letter said only this. If you marry her without reading the last entry, you'll never understand why I really let you go. The final audio file. The one I hadn't listened to. Still sitting on the buried flash drive under the floorboards. Still waiting. And I had 5 days before the wedding. The wedding day didn't start with a sunrise. It started with me sitting on the hallway floor in sweatpants and a hoodie, a cold cup of coffee going stale beside me, and the flash drive back in my hand like it had never left. Lydia was still asleep. Her wedding dress hung from the closet door, perfectly steamed, untouched. The dog snored softly at the foot of the bed, unaware that my entire nervous system was buzzing like a downed power line. I had 5 hours until the ceremony. And one last file. I don't know what I was expecting. A final confession? Some cruel attempt at sabotage? A Hail Mary from a woman who had already done enough damage? What I heard was different. Her voice was softer in this one. No notes. No codes. No behavioral terms. Just her. Vulnerable. Human. A version of her I hadn't heard in years. This isn't for manipulation. It's not part of the project. If you're hearing this, it means everything else has already fallen apart. And maybe that's good. Maybe it should have. She paused. You could hear her breath hitch, not like someone about to cry, but someone exhausted from holding it all in. I didn't let you go because I didn't love you. I let you go because I knew I was changing you, and I couldn't stop myself. I saw the way you started second-guessing everything. The way you asked for permission before speaking. The way you smiled less. And the worst part? A piece of me liked it. Liked the control. Because I didn't feel in control of anything else. She sighed deeply. A long, heavy inhale like she was finally exhaling 5 years of guilt. You never stopped being good. You were the constant. The warmth. The tether. But I was never going to get better with you watching. I needed you to leave so I could finally see myself without the mirror of your kindness. That's why I cried when I saw you were getting married. Not because you left, but because you made it out. And I'm still stuck here." The audio ended with a click. No goodbye, no closure, just truth. It didn't feel like a bomb. It felt like a release. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was something I hadn't in a very long time. Peace. I got up, put the flash drive back in the drawer, not buried this time, and made breakfast. French toast, extra cinnamon, the way Lydia liked it. She came out of the bedroom in a tank top and pajama pants, hair still messy, eyes puffy from sleep. When she saw me at the stove, she smiled without saying anything and wrapped her arms around me from behind. No questions, no pressure, just love. That afternoon, we got married in a greenhouse filled with string lights, old jazz, and 87 people who had absolutely no idea the emotional exorcism I had completed that morning. Lydia wore yellow shoes. I wore my dad's cufflinks. We said our vows in a circle of wildflowers and standing friends. No podiums, no aisle. Just a quiet agreement to stop running from ourselves and start moving toward each other, fully seen. And when she looked me in the eyes and said, "I choose all of you, even the parts you haven't forgiven yet," I knew I was safe. Not just loved. Safe. Callie never showed up. No drama. No interruptions. Maybe she was finally done. Maybe she let go the same way I had. Or maybe she was never the villain. Just a woman trying to love without hurting and failing harder than most. But none of that mattered anymore. Because that night, in a room full of people cheering and clapping and dancing like they were trying to keep time from moving, I kissed Lydia under a sky of string lights and finally became someone I never thought I'd be again. Whole. And if you're still reading this, still here at the end of all of it, maybe that's the only ending worth anything. Not revenge, not answers, just peace, and a future you never thought you'd earn, until you did.